Welcome to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Norris. We're going to grow your leadership through neuroscience, psychology, and theology. Hi, everybody. We are still navigating a global pandemic. We're leading our organizations through this global crisis. However, organizations are made up of individual people. Some are feeling increased anxiety. Others are feeling angry. Some people are shutting down in depression. Wouldn't it be great to have a therapeutic session to learn how to first lead ourselves emotionally through this time and then find equipping to lead our teammates? In times of crisis, we all have a tendency to react as a victim, an offender, and/or a rescuer, moving into denial or entitlement. How do we make sense of our emotions? Why do we feel powerless in situations like shelter-at-home orders? How do we know if we're in denial? Are we powering up on people right now? Are we rescuing people rather than emotionally sitting with them as they metabolize these times? In what ways are we demonstrating entitlement? Well, welcome to episode number 16 of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. My name is Patrick Norris, and our goal today is to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire. I'm so glad you're with us today. Today's conversation is with my friends and professional therapists, Rick and Christine Presley. I'm so glad to have you with us wherever you get our podcast or in the video version on YouTube. We'll drop new content every week, shooting for each Thursday of the month. If this podcast is adding value to your leadership in life, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to this podcast, like it, and comment in reviews. Also, help us to get the word out by sharing on your social media platforms. If you subscribe and comment at iTunes, it'll make our show pop up in recommended shows, and it will really help us out. So please, we ask you to do that for us. Also, I'd like to introduce you to an incredible opportunity. Why do you relate to money the way you do? Why does your brain relate to money the way it does? Wouldn't you like to have insights as to why your leadership teammates manage money the way they do? In our online financial personality training event, each attendee will be given a dynamic assessment instrument that is grounded in theories of psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience, neuromarketing, attachment, and addiction. It is both an event that's experiential and one of training. You'll learn why you might be vulnerable to workaholism, prosperity guilt, hoarding, compulsive buying, and a whole lot more. You see, money holds power for people. And when someone has the ability to know why they do what they do, they can name it to tame it, they can know it to grow it. RedInkRevival.com. Look under the events tab to find out more about our online financial personality training event. By the way, today's episode is brought to you in partnership with River Valley Conference. River Valley Conference is an amazing pastor and church leader conference. I landed at one of their one-day events here in Kansas City, and it was absolutely off the charts. Our whole Red Ink team is going to be there hosting a breakout on June 8th and 9th. Go to rivervalleyconference.com to register. Use code REDINK, one word, REDINK, to get $10 off. I hope to see you there. Let's go now to this week's episode number 16 with my good friends Rick and Christine Presley as we talk about pivoting to emotional empowerment in a crisis. What is the deal with, today I see people who are feeling powerless. There are people that are angry and they're spewing a lot of their emotion out on the public forum. There are people who are mad at the politicians, and it depends on which side you fall on. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, whoever. Somebody that's angry is going to be mad at whoever their targets are. There are people that are mad at the media, people that are just mad and they don't know why necessarily. They can't put it in a scope and target it, but they are feeling like they've lost a lot. They've lost community. They've lost regularity, certainty. Then there's, of course, people losing jobs, economic certainties of the future. So let's kind of just dig in. What would you guys say to some of our listeners around the idea of being a victim, feeling like that you don't have any control, you have no power. How can we help people get re-empowered? I'll just tee it up to either one of you to jump.
Yeah. Well, I think just first of all, I want to be another voice in all of our listeners' lives to say that it's okay to feel anxious, it's okay to feel worried and stressed and confused and all that, because these are unbelievably unique times. I mean, nobody saw this coming. Well, if there were people that saw it coming, weren't telling the vast majority of us.
Yeah.
And so, life has changed so fast, and there are so many questions and so many uncertainties about the future that if you're not having some level of question or anxiety or worry about your finances or worry about your loved ones or whatever, whether that be health or economic or other issues, then please write a book and tell us how you're doing that, because that's not normal.
Right.
like it's normal to have a level of anxiety in a time like this. So, I just want to validate all of our listeners for just walking through this and trying to figure it out, and it's crazy. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. When you think of the good side of anxiety, the redemptive side, it's to keep us alert, to keep us moving, and to find innovations, to find ways to handle difficult situations maybe that we haven't been tuned in on. So that side of anxiety is really good, but before long, it moves into a ruminating powerlessness that we begin feeling victimized, and we just want to be done with it all. And yet we don't have the power to be done with it all. We don't have that right. We have to still walk through it. And, I think of that Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. The good news is that we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We don't have to stop and live there.
Correct.
We get to walk through it. And that's where we have a redemptive purpose. We know that at the other side, we can choose things that help our lives be better. But before we kind of, get into all that, if you had a client, Christine, that came in and they were feeling like, I'm over this deal. I'm frustrated with the whole thing. I don't like it. And they find themselves crying. And, some people are living alone. And they don't have anybody. Or they don't have emotional support. Maybe they are a single mom and have little ones, but they don't have anybody to help them process through it. So what would you offer to somebody who's struggling right now?
Well, I think first I would just validate what they're experiencing and honoring that experience that they're having, because it is real. I mean, just as we've talked about, it is real. And after a period of that time where we're just holding space with that anxiety, able to then identify even underneath of that, what's the fear? What is the fear? Name the fear, identify the fear, and what are the feelings that are associated with that? Where are you holding that in your body? And just noticing it. Not even trying to remove it, but just noticing it. Sometimes when we have heightened anxiety, it's like something inside of us is like screaming, wanting like to be seen. And so just even turning toward it to notice it allows it just to settle a little bit. To allow that to just, I see that part of you. Even in our own self. In our own self, not just, it's important to be seen in each other, for others to see us, but that just turning toward ourselves and saying, okay, I feel the anxiety in my gut, or I feel it heavy on my shoulders, or I feel it in the back of my head, and just noticing even where that is. And so it's a body, it's what's going on in the body, what's going on in the mind, and what's going on in the spirit. So
what's going on in the body, which you've gone through some of the examples of anxiety in your gut, anxiety in your neck, shoulders, tightening, maybe your heart rate is elevated. Just noticing that in the body is huge. But then the mind, what would be some examples of what could be going on in the mind?
I think negative thoughts, like very catastrophic negative thoughts even. I don't have enough. I'm not enough. I don't matter. If somebody is all alone, they don't have a spouse or children in the home, I'm all alone. Nobody sees me. I'm always all alone. And then we just start that cycle. It's almost like a snowball that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So negative thoughts about self.
Catastrophic thoughts about the future.
Right, catastrophic thoughts about the future, about the finances. Will I have a house to even live in? If I've lost my job and this doesn't ever end. It's just that negative cycle in the mind where it just plummets us emotionally, because what you think, then your emotions follow that.
Yes.
And then also that's where the body then comes in as well.
Yeah. So when that is happening, where you're tuning into your mind, one of the things that many of us have a tendency to do is tune into our mind, but we do it with criticism. Yeah. It's like, okay, I shouldn't be fearing that. Stop it. Especially in the Christian framework, where people have the shoulds. They should do this, they should do that, and they know that they're not. So when they think of tuning in, it's to tune in to correct or rebuke. And what you're saying is, no, tune in to be kind, to see, like affection, to have love for yourself, which goes back to the great commandment, which is to love God, love your neighbor as yourself. To love yourself comes second, and that's seeing yourself. So you've got what you said, be aware what's going on in your body, be aware what's going on in your mind, but now then let's offer up, what do we want to be aware of going on in our spirit? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think all of life is sacred. And so if I were to be sitting with a client who has brought in their faith, whatever that looks like, and let's just even say that they are evangelical Christian, and they've brought in that to the room, I'm able to then speak with them about that. So we've been not given the spirit of fear, but of power, and of sound mind. And I think about the truth that's in that, and when we have the spirit of fear, that gets so big in us that kind of counteracts this like empowerment piece. I think that is really what we're really looking for. Like if we can feel like we have some kind of power over something, and not in a derogatory way or like a violent type way, I think that gives our spirit a sense of calm. It also mirrors what the word says.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is interesting because all of this is biblical, but it's also neurobiological. Your brain is constantly scanning to find some kind of security so it doesn't have to work as hard. It needs to assess the threats, but when it doesn't know the threat, it doesn't know where it's coming from. It hasn't been able to figure out the processing that brought us to where we are. Then it is on high alert looking for whatever. And that's where a lot of our weird behaviors have been spinning right now, eating a whole bag of Doritos chips at one time, getting an ice cream gallon and being like, I bet I can nail this but before I end this next episode of Seinfeld,
Or scrolling through social media or shopping online or, playing endless games of hearts on your computer.
Simple things.
Simple things that just take up a lot of space and time. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to cope and soothe with this anxiety that we're feeling.
Because we probably haven't tuned into it.
When you said our brain is always on alert and looking for answers, it made me think of times when I've been outside of the country in a foreign country, and you're walking around, you're in this other country where everybody speaks another language. And I found myself in the first probably 4 or 5 days of that experience being unbelievably exhausted. And it's not that we're physically doing much, it's just that our brain has to work so hard to try to figure out the language. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are experiencing in this season, where they're just on such high alert to, every time they turn on the news, every time they get on their phone and there's an update of something and somebody's changing something, whatever, it's that constant, I don't know what normal is. I don't know where safety is.
Right.
And your brain is always trying to figure out what's safe. And once we get into that new normal and a new pattern, even if it's stuck like this for a little while, people would eventually begin to catch up. Their brains and their bodies would catch up and start to flow with this quote unquote new normal, even though the new normal sucks.
Yeah.
Because it's not a constant everyday something different. We start to figure out the language of what we're living in, and our brain doesn't have to work as hard.
And if we don't encounter a dangerous outcome by going to Aldi or our grocery store, then our brains say, oh, you have been okay the last 3 times you went to the store, so maybe you'll be okay this time. So the stress level begins to go down on that alert deal. But, I went to the grocery store yesterday. I went to Aldi yesterday. And, you're walking by people and, I didn't have a mask. They didn't have a mask.
Yeah.
And, I believe this is how I endeavor to give my brain handles of protection, is I believe what Jesus did in redemption is my protection. But that doesn't change the reality that as I'm walking down the different food aisles, that my brain is taking the information that I've gotten in the news and everywhere else and thinking, is that person talking to their spouse as I'm walking by? And my brain's just aware. And so it's working harder, which my understanding is that the brain is one of the biggest individual energy hogs of the body. So it's always looking to dump unuseful information. So right now, because of the threat level, it thinks every piece of information is important. That's why people keep going back to the news and watching the same news thing over and over and over, because their brain's thinking, if I can just get one more piece of news, I'll be okay.
Because it offers a sense of control.
That back to the power.
It offers a sense of power, and if I can control something, then I'm not a victim to this pandemic. So having that sense of like powerless or helplessness or I don't have choice, setting in a victim role for a long time, it feels like we have to respond in some way. We can't tolerate that sense of powerlessness, so we do those things like listen over and over and over again, because that offers us this, what is sometimes could feel like a false sense of control, because we're not hearing anything new. Most of the time. When I think of this idea of posturing as a victim is where you always feel one down and you have no power. It's the identity that I'm not enough for what I'm facing. And so I either have to rage out and give the illusion to myself that I have some power, or I shut down in that kind of whole freeze deal. And then in these cases, most of us don't have anywhere to escape, so the only thing we can do to escape is to maybe withdraw, which is different than isolation. So when you're a victim, when you are noticing, say I tune into myself and I notice that I'm seeing myself as an emotional victim, what do I do? How would I offset that? What would I do to balance that out?
Christine has used a saying that you're only a victim for a nanosecond.
Actually, that comes
from somebody.
From Vicki Tidwell Palmer. She says you're only a victim for a nanosecond, because it's what you do next. That's what's going to speak your story. That's what's going to either empower you or it's going to disempower you. You're going to stay in that victim sense, or you're going to then become a perpetrator if you're coming from the victim side of things. So Vicki Tidwell Palmer, you're only a victim for a nanosecond. So beautiful.
And then what do you do? So it's intolerable to be a victim. Then what?
So the victim for a nanosecond means that you lost your job. You were a victim to something you couldn't control.
Okay.
The moment you leave your building, you are no longer being victimized. If you could switch it, put that word in there. We were victimized the moment we found out we lost our job. But the moment after that, we're no longer being victimized. It is a stance that we're taking against or to the information we just received that we were powerless over, but now am I going to continue to walk in a sense of powerlessness?
Yeah.
So the victim or the victim mentality or other language that you hear out there, people playing the victim role, is the moment at which they were victimized and then their response to that.
Yeah.
Am I going to continue to walk it out that I don't look for a job, I don't ask for help from family and friends, I don't look for opportunities for help with groceries, I don't do this, I just kind of sit in this place of I can't do anything to control anything in my life.
Yeah.
I can't respond in any healthy way, and so I just stay stuck in this place.
Yeah, and so in a situation like that, you have people that over a lifetime have been let go of a job, have been perpetrated upon. They are victims to multiple things, and there's a pattern in their emotional life where they are legitimately a victim for a nanosecond, but then they have identified emotionally as a victim. They're powerless. They don't have any choices in front of them. They have no responsibility that they can take. And then they add one more, and then one more, and then one more nanosecond legitimate victimization. Right. And now then they're living their lives where their brain has evolved to assess everything as I'm powerless. I have no options, right? So what do we do? What do we do with that? If we are in a victim's emotional mindset, how do we get out of that?
I think your first to get out of it is to begin to look for what is my responsibility now. There was a moment in which something happened to me that I had no power over, but my response to that then becomes my responsibility. Going off of the current crisis that we're experiencing and going back to kind of some of the stuff that we work with so often in our clients is, oftentimes we have a spouse who's been acting out some way sexually. The partner finds out, in that moment of finding out, they are victimized, they are a victim of something they had no power over. But how then they're going to move away from that is the stance they take. Are they going to stay stuck in the victim, or are they going to start to look for their sense of responsibility? What is my responsibility? Instead of waiting on him or her to fix their life or to get themselves figured out, what can I do to protect myself? What can I do to help myself stay safe, to care for myself, to nurture myself, to protect my children potentially? What are the acts of my responsibility instead of kind of staying stuck here in this place of, well, I'll just see if he figures it out or not.
Yeah.
Or I'll, coming back to the pandemic, I'll just see what the government does.
Yeah.
I'll just see what society does, Like, what are your options? What is your responsibility for yourself in this as you take steps forward?
Yeah.
That helps to get out of that place of victim mindset thinking, reacting to the situations.
I want to invite you to one of our Red Ink Revival Leadership Retreats. Retreats are 40-hour plus intensive experiences led by psychotherapists, neuroscientists, and tenured pastors. These amazing intensives help pastors, staff, and marketplace leaders lead wholeheartedly in every sphere of life. Our retreats are profoundly helpful to you as you lead your organization. However, the most important person you will ever lead is you. Pastors and marketplace leaders struggle with the same emotional drivers. Statistics show that 70% of pastors struggle with depression and fear of inadequacy. 77% feel they do not have a good marriage. 90% are workaholics. 64% are engaged in secret activity around alcohol, drugs, and sexual behaviors. 84% wish they had a processed friendship that they could confide in, but grieve the fact that they don't have such a person. Today's leaders are painfully struggling with depression, isolation, anxiety, and panic attacks, and then powerlessly ruminating over what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. Then to right the ship, leaders tend to chase the illusion that a greater performance and a greater success will quiet the enemy in their souls. But performance, even if gained, measured, and celebrated, never quiets the soul. These ruminating emotional states gain momentum over days, months, and years and give power to unmanageable behaviors like rage in marriage, avoidance as parents, or addictions like alcoholism, recreational drugs, pornography, or sexually acting out. For the spiritual leader, succumbing to one or more of these throws them into a firestorm of shame that ultimately keeps them in a cycle of bondage. Yet neurobiologically, we have learned that inordinate behavior is never about the ability to white-knuckle discipline through the temptation. The behavior is driven by emotional griefs, losses, and relationship injuries from our backstories. These emotional memories become embedded into our brain's neurocircuits. Until these memories are addressed and appropriately reprocessed, the struggler will continue to grow in the struggle until there comes the day of public discovery and painful disclosure. Red Ink Retreats provide hands-on experiences in concepts, techniques, and coaching derived from theology, brain research, and psychological modalities. Our goal is to improve your individual leadership satisfaction, releasing a freedom for an energized life and a surprising greater performance. Go to redinkrevival.com and click the Retreats tab. You'll be inspired by previous retreat attenders, you'll hear their stories, and then you can dream of what could happen if you attended a retreat yourself. It might bring exponentially more fruitfulness to your organization. It might save your ministry, your marriage, your kids, and maybe even your self-respect. What is the value of leading wholeheartedly? So what are you waiting for? Go and register for our next retreat. Thank you for letting me share our Red Ink Retreats dream.
I was watching an interview this week with Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. Yeah. And he was talking about how that this is such an opportunity that entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs, are looking for. What does this crisis now afford me new choices? I can do new things. And as an example, he said that there are people who had never given themselves the license to explore online contract business, like being an administrative assistant in a contract level, and that they are now making $25 an hour on their own terms and brand new opportunities. Amazing. Well, the true entrepreneur, as he's describing, would be somebody who could see beyond the crisis. And just like in the stock market, for anybody who understands the stock market, that whenever you have a bear market, you're told that that's a great time to invest your financial resources so that you can maximize the multiplication of the top end of that. Well, in the same way, we're in a global crisis, but there are opportunities all around us to grow, we can make choices today, believing that tomorrow I can be better. The question is, who do I want to be today and who do I want to be tomorrow? And your brain will take that and say, oh, look, you have power. Yeah. The brain will actually calm the stressors because you are tuning into that you have that power. I think that is so interesting. And yet so many of us do live in that victim world. I know I can go there. It's not hard. Sure. It's not until I gained a lot of the tools that you guys have offered and that I've learned over a lot of my growth period. But it's the Bible. This is, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, choose. That the power is that you have a choice. God always gives you a choice. Now, you may not like all the options, right? Let's talk about that. What if you don't like all your options? What if you don't like, right now we're in an isolation, quarantine. We are supposed to be in our homes and not going out, stay at home, sheltering, all that kind of stuff. Well, I don't like that. If somebody's feeling like, I want to do what I want to do, well, you don't have that choice, but you still have choices. Talk to that.
Well, I think even though you don't like it, there's still a piece of identifying the reality of it. The reality is real. It's like the reality of this pandemic is that it's real.
Yes.
The reality of your being at home stuck at home or whatever you are experiencing, it is real.
Yeah.
And to be able to take an honest assessment of the choices that are in front of us,
Yeah.
whether, okay, maybe it's a small choice. Well, do we go to Aldi or do we go to McAlister's?
Yeah.
I mean, and that
That's a
may
choice.
seem simple, but there's still some empowerment. Like, I can choose.
Yes.
What are my options?
Yeah.
And then choose what is best for me.
Yeah.
And I'm using the grocery store as like a simple thing, but there is something that will offer the brain a almost like a hit of empowerment that then can propel even more, and that gives more empowerment. And this is, I was looking up earlier today what the definition of empowerment is.
Okay.
And it's the process of becoming stronger and more confident. I loved that.
Yeah. Wow.
I loved that. That
Process.
process. It's a process. It's not just, okay, all of a sudden I'm empowered. And yet there is some piece of that, like it's a process of becoming stronger and more confident.
Yes.
And in matters specifically over yourself.
Yeah.
It's never about controlling other people.
Yeah.
It's always about
Yeah.
controlling yourself. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts, this choice, this identifying your reality, identifying what the choices are, even though you don't like them,
Yeah.
and then making a decision after that.
Yeah.
And
am
the
I gonna
process, I love, the biblical words would be stuff like, we walk by faith, we walk by faith. Walk is a continuation, it's a process.
It's a process, right.
And the
It's an
idea.
active doing.
Yes, and it's got multiple choices in it
Yeah.
that you are activating. So, like Rick, he didn't go to Aldi. He was wanting to pull his hair out, so he jumped in the car and went to a place called Weston, Missouri, of all places. So,
Just had
what
to
was
get
that
away.
all about, Rick?
Oh my goodness. So in the middle of all of this, we're also trying to buy a house. So like stress upon stress upon stress. So, as anybody who's bought a house knows that there's just a measure of uncertainty and stress when you're just kind of coming to the closing and getting all the documents and loans and all this kind of stuff. And so we're right down to the final wire. And this is Saturday morning. This is yesterday. We get the final approval, or this is Friday, I guess.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
2 days ago. And anyway, something came across that just spiked my anxiety in this whole thing. And I'm just like, I gotta get out of this little apartment. I have to go. So I just told Christine, I'm going for the drive. I didn't know where I was going. I just get in my car and just start heading north. And I've heard about this little town of Weston and never been there. So I found myself there and driving around and just listening to music. And that was my way of calming and coping and social distancing at the same time, and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I couldn't continue to stay stuck in that same place. I tried to go take a nap. I tried to go lay down, and it wasn't working for me. So I did
And
something else.
what that story does is it embodies that empowerment, those choices that you get to decide that I can't do everything, but I can do something, and I do have power. I love that. So what happens is, we tend towards, when we have the nanosecond victimization, something legitimate, and we're all victims right now in the legitimate sense that we don't have control over whether we can go out in public without damaging or hurting somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that now moves into what we were talking about, where we have to activate choices. But one of the pivots that we often make is we move to this hyper readjusting our position. We end up being an offender in the sense of we're going to have power that is the illusion of power, but in it, what we're doing is we are putting ourselves in a one-up. We're trying to make people feel like less than. And again, what that can look like is I just need to get on social media and spew out my rage about something. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to rage about something. Like somebody the other day on their social media platform said something like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And you're about to get a lot of something. I don't get it. I don't get it. That grocery stores, they can meet alcohol, liquor stores, they can sell alcohol. They're essential. I don't get it. Churches aren't essential. And it's like, It's interesting because 1/2 second of a rational thought, there's a lot more people going to be in a church environment where that thing could go viral than there is in a liquor store when you have 2 or 3 people at a time in there. And I'm not promoting liquor. I'm just saying that it makes sense to me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a liquor store is essential, but I don't drink. Somebody else that drinks, maybe they think it is. I don't know. But the point is that this person who's putting that out there, it's really not about grocery stores, liquor stores, or church.
No.
It's really about I am identifying as a victim, and the only thing I know to do, and probably from childhood and their family of origin practiced in their systems, to anytime you don't have power, you've got to throw emotion around so that it feels like that you have power for something.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute. If that's one of the faces that we move into, what do we do with that kind of, if we have a tendency to offend or to power up, and we're tuning in, which is the first choice, what do we do? How do we handle this once we know, man, I'm angry?
Yeah, I think slowing down and realizing the moment that the victim part was tapped into, moment that you felt trapped or powerless or like you didn't get what you thought you deserved, or especially like with our church can't meet, but liquor stores are essential, that type of thing, where you felt like you sat in that victim chair and you didn't like it, and so you had to respond.
Yeah.
I think knowledge is power, and so knowing what that looks like and when that happened can allow you to see. It brings it outside of you so that you can actually see it, instead of it being like on you and you're just like living in it, but seeing it. And so being able to do that, and then from that, then looking at your options. Again, you don't have to, even if you jump to like this angry offender type position, you don't have to do that the next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have choice.
Yep.
You can choose it, and knowing when you bounce off, that's your point of choice.
Yeah.
So
That's good. So you're talking about options, right? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about this is there's a difference between how we react to something versus how we respond to something. Okay, so when I'm teaching this to clients, our reactions are that state of being victim. Our reactions are the denial we kind of try to deny reality, or the offending, or the rescuing, or other these unhealthy reactions that are just kind of from the gut. They just happen. They probably have been trained in us over years by multiple experiences, oftentimes formed within their context of our family of origin. They're just the way we do life, and the way we respond to crisis, and the way we respond to stress, or react to stress, I should say, react. Versus response is this more thoughtful, slowed down response to whatever I'm doing. So Christine was just talking about the offender. Being an offender, powering up, and one of the ways I thought one might offend is to say, well, screw all these things that are being told that we need to do. I'm just going to go out and continue to live my life the way I am anyways. Well, you could think that, well, I don't want to feel like a victim, so I'm not a victim, I'm not powerless, so I'm going to go and continue living life my way. Well, that's fine for you. You may or may not get sick. And you may think that you have enough immunity to be able to or enough strength to work through it, and it'll just be like the flu or whatever. But what you're not doing is you're not realizing that you're offending someone else.
Yeah.
You're highly probable of offending someone else, because if you got sick and then you're just going to continue living life, then now you're going to potentially infect someone who doesn't have the strength and immunity that you do. That's not nice.
Yeah.
So that's not a thoughtful reaction to what's happening. To respond to it would be to look for my options. I don't want to feel like a victim, and I don't want to offend someone. So what are my options?
Yeah.
What can I do
Yes.
What do I have control over? How can I continue to go out? So my options are to get in my car and drive to Weston.
Yeah, right.
In the isolation of my car,
Yes.
I'm not hurting anyone, just doing my thing. That was an option that I took.
Yeah.
So looking for my options of how do I manage through this and still be kind and still be polite and still be thoughtful to others around me as well.
One of the things that recently I saw was a particular minister who went outside to play in the street of a big city, play football with his son. So, both of them are in the same home. It's all fits. But this particular person has already had the novel coronavirus and COVID-19, but they've been 2 weeks after. Well, the video shows that they were getting ready to go play. Well, there were people that triggered their fears all over, and the feelings of irresponsibility, and a lot of them don't know the backstories or the details. And so this put this minister in a defensive mode of having to shut down a lot of what people were saying, but didn't want to address all the issues. And I sat there reading the feed, because I don't know, I guess I like drama. I was reading the feed of the back and forths, and I mean, we're talking hundreds of comments. And I'm reading the back and forth, and I'm thinking, people are clearly not in their rational cognitive brain. They don't know the details. They're hurling accusations against the minister. The minister, in turn, is disassociated from any of the ability to push buttons, and is not able to thoughtfully. I mean, if you want, truthfully, the guy, he's past the 2 weeks. It's his son. Nobody's in the street. It all fits within, social distances. But why would you put that on social media? And to me, stuff like that is where our brains are, again, just grasping for a sense of power. And then sometimes we end up powering up to say, well, I can do this, and it feels good to stir the pot with everybody else. And, because it's the illusion of power. And I'm not blaming anybody in that whole story. I'm just saying it's a study in human neurobiology. It's crazy.
I think it's.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that when we talk about the brain, the first question is, and you teach very well on this, that am I safe? And if we have the sense of we're not safe, we can't logically or even rationally think properly. And so then we start jumping on bandwagons because we're looking for that safety. We're looking for something to make us feel safe and to calm down our limbic system. I mean, or the brainstem. We're looking for that calming effect. And when we don't feel safe, then we go to these other how dare you? You shouldn't. You can't. You. And actually, we are only in charge of what we can do. And so we have to, which is hard to do sometimes in the middle of this, we have to trust that I'm going to do my part and you're going to do your part. And yet, a video like that can look like you're not doing your part, which makes me not safe, which means I've got to power up and make you do your part. And that's never going to make you feel what you want to feel.
It's so true. So true. Some of the people, they were like, I've got family members in this city that are dying, and you don't care a thing about them. Not knowing that this minister has leveraged their entire church to help. And yet, it all makes sense to that person. And you could just feel these people who honored the minister, the pastor, honored them with trust, and now that trust is broken over something that is completely unnecessary. But it is a study in the way, the brain stem, am I safe? The limbic brain, am I loved? And then now let's explore, let's learn, let's grow together. One of the things that we do when we move past that nanosecond is denial. Let's talk about denial a little bit.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you're talking about all these examples is, I think there's a lot of people who are who are facing the reaction to feeling like a victim, because we hit that first.
Yeah.
Because we are victimized, right? We have a moment of victimized. There's something that's happening that's out of our control.
Yeah.
And then how do we react? And I think there's a lot of people in denial. I mean, we see this, I think, proliferately in social media, who you see the ones who are living in denial are the ones who are raising a really loud voice of saying, this is unnecessary.
Right.
All these precautions are unnecessary.
Right.
Well, we don't yet know, we're probably not going to know until 2 or 3 years from now what really was necessary.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if we completely shut down everything and we locked everybody in their homes, we would get rid of this a whole lot faster and a whole lot more effectively than even the measures we're taking now.
Yeah.
So that, like, we have to bring ourselves back into reality. Like, our response, not a reaction of denial, but our response is to look for what is real, what is reality.
Yeah.
And the fact is that this is a virus, this is a medical issue, this is a threat to our well-being and our safety and our lives. We don't yet know the full extent of all of that, so we don't have hard evidence. But to react to the lack of evidence, or react in denial to the lack of data,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah,
say,
the
well,
evidence is there.
we don't have to do all of this,
Yeah.
or this is all unnecessary, I think is that place of, like, I'm trying to gain some power by going into denial, and I'm going to hold on, I'm going to grab onto every single post and feed and response and everybody from everyone else who's also in denial to prove my point that this is unnecessary.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's unnecessary.
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
probably necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Sure
to
looks
what
like it to
extent,
me.
we don't know.
Yeah.
But to just say that it's unnecessary because you don't have the data, I think is a response, is a reaction to feeling like a victim.
Yeah. You know, Proverbs talks about if you answer a thing before you've heard it, you're a fool.
Yeah.
And I'm always, my mantra is, if I'm going to mess up, I want to mess up loving people.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody who's very frustrated and in denial, it's about what I've lost. It's not about what I can do to love people. Mm-hmm. And the love factor does create for us an openness to say, you know what, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to see what the facts are. But when you look at denial and reality, these two swings, denial and reality, what I find is that some people get stuck in denial because they don't want the answer. Mm-hmm. They don't want the answer of reality. And, you know, I talk to sometimes to skeptics or atheists, and sometimes in the middle of a debate, and it's all healthy and functional, and it's not about winning the debate, but, you know, there's these interactions. Sometimes I've asked, well, what would you do if I could prove to you that Jesus is Lord? I just am curious, would you give your life to him and let off the brakes, or no? And they immediately realize, they tune into the reality, oh wait, I guess I am kind of fighting for a position, not for what's real.
Yeah.
And so there is a litmus test there that happens. And I find that same kind of reality that some people, just like some atheists, not all, but some atheists would say, no, I'm not going to give my life to Christ no matter what you prove. Mm-hmm. Well, then why are we talking? Because we know that this conversation's not going anywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
The same thing would be true about somebody in a situation like COVID-19, novel coronavirus. I'm at home. I don't want to be at home. I don't want to look at reality because I have already made up my mind. I don't want to like this. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to like it. Well, that's a choice. Mm-hmm. And until you face that reality, you're never going to be able to move on to other parts of reality. So I think it's incredibly important. One of the things we talk about with this victim deal, the offender, you look at, moving to denial. One of the things that happens is entitlement. Let's talk about entitlement a little bit, where a person begins to feel like I've got special privileges, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's the giftings that I have, but I always feel like I can beat a system. I feel like there's a unique slice of solution that nobody's found yet, and that I can crack the code. So I do have those entitlement things in me. In this season, people have entitlement where, what you were talking earlier, they can go out in public and kind of screw the world because I can do what I want to do. What do you tell people who, once they tune in and think, gosh, I'm entitled, what would be something that they could do to begin to kind of unwind their entitlement?
I think entitlement's a unique thing. Yeah. It's a big deal in the work we do with addiction. Entitlement is often something we very much try to assess how much entitlement a client is kind of operating in. And the unique thing that I find about entitlement is that oftentimes it's the story we tell ourselves, it's the permission we give ourselves to do something. But for many of us, we have enough social understanding and grace that we would never say that out loud.
So slow that down. Let's go back over that.
So it's the story that we tell ourselves that gives us permission to act the way we're acting.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, this has happened to me, or this isn't happening. I didn't get this, or whatever. So therefore, I can act this way, or I can do this type of thing. But for many of us, we know enough about social norms that we would never say that out loud, because we understand that once we say that, it's like embarrassing, it's shame, it's like people would react like, who do you think you are?
Right, for real.
Like when you're trying to beat the system, whatever the example is, when you say, I can beat the system, if you were to narrate every step of the way and talk about your decisions and why you're making decisions with a friend or your wife or somebody, there's a high probability that they would be at some point in that process going, who do you think you are?
Right.
I think that's a good way to kind of tune into if you are responding to being a victim by then reacting and going into entitlement. Yeah. These ways I'm going to continue to respond to the world and act in the world and go out and do things or purchase things. I think entitlement's really kind of at the core of all this crazy purchasing of toilet paper. And when you go to the grocery store and it says limit one per family, well, they're trying to do that to be kind, to be thoughtful to the world. And then you go in there and you say, well, screw that. I can buy 10.
I've got 5 kids here. Each kid grab one. Here's a credit card. Right.
Yeah. So there's an entitlement. Like, you don't need that much toilet paper. You don't need that much whatever you're buying, and to not be thoughtful of your neighbor who might need it, I think is operating within entitlement.
Yeah. My entitlement would be stuff like, go to a Royals game and buy a cheap seat and then go sit down in an empty seat much closer. That would be my entitlement. My entitlement would be go to a restaurant, there's a table that is the premier table, and then just schmooze the host or hostess and try to figure out how to get that table. But in the world of addiction, it's a much harsher reality, isn't it? And it plays out. So what you're talking about, as an example, would be where an addict in the sexual acting out would be, having maybe anonymous relationships. And in that anonymous relationship, they feel like, well, my spouse is not providing, nothing's working out for me. They have the nanosecond victimization. Then they move from that to, I don't have any control, so I'm going to power up and I'm going to get what I want. I'm in denial. I can't see reality. And now I'm in entitlement. I deserve this outlet, which, again, anybody would ask that question. And truthfully, even in my role, depending on who you are, somebody might go to the baseball game and be like, who do you think you are? I spent $100 for this seat, and you're just slipping down here because nobody's sitting there. And they have a point. I'm the kind, my entitlement is if you have a long line of cars in a 4-lane road, so you're 2 lanes, a long line of cars and they're all in 1 lane. It's like, come on, people, everybody, let's get this thing moving. That's what I feel. And so I wrestle with that because I do feel like it is an offending behavior to violate somebody else's position in that line. And yet I think, man, you're messing this system up. Let's get this thing moving.
Right. It's a zipper.
Yeah, a zipper. Zip this
zipper.
thing. So you've experienced the same
I do
feeling.
that because that's like I'm taking from the professionals who study this type of thing, and they say the zipper is more effective than everybody just trying to just move over and get in line. It's like, man, I'll zoom by everybody because they're not doing what the professionals say we should do.
Well, see, Tina's the kind, she'll fall in line with the system. Yeah. She doesn't want anybody to, feel like she's, grabbing them. So she'll get in the way back in the line. And I'm the kind that I believe in the zipper. I'm very much into the zipper. And yet the people like Tina, I know it makes, it feels like an unjust thing. And so the tension you hold with that is weird. Yeah. Well, in this season, we've got people with a lot of urges to entitlements. I deserve. That's where I deserve a bag of Doritos. I deserve a gallon of ice cream. I deserve to, even go out and to, violate all the social distancing policies. So again, when you're in entitlement, what do you say to a person to get them unwound?
You go for it.
Okay. So I think the response to entitlement is humility. To humble ourselves and to become a servant. Yeah. To become thoughtful of our neighbor, of our family, of another besides me. That there are people who are in greater need than me with whatever's going on. If we could swing back around to the work in sexual addiction, to be thoughtful that your spouse may not be having sex with you because there might be a much, much bigger reason than she just, quote unquote, doesn't want to. Yeah. Like to just go out and act out and do whatever you want because your spouse is saying no is not at all being thoughtful. Yeah. And operating within humility of what is going on in her life. What are the issues she's facing? How is she responding to everything? To not, coming back to the current situation, to not be thoughtful when you're at the grocery store about your neighbor, but taking precautions about purchasing what you need versus what you want. Yeah. I think is, so operating within humility, I think is the answer to that. Yeah. And just slowing down, humbling yourself, being thoughtful of someone else before self. So good. Well, I love it, guys. I think we've given some tools. I think we've given some, just conversation, some ways to be able to think and process and lean into these times. And just so appreciate both of you and the expertise you bring to the table. I feel like we all got a therapeutic session, and we're honored to be able to have that. So can't wait till our next time together. But love you guys.
Good.
You too.
You too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I want to encourage you that you are enough to lead through this unprecedented time. God has called and anointed you to bring innovative solutions to the novel problems we're facing. We at Red Ink Revival are praying for you to rise. You might be wondering, what's next? I want to encourage you to go to our website at redinkrevival.com. There you're going to find our resources, retreats, upcoming special events, and a growing bank of content. Sign up for our free e-newsletter to stay abreast of all that is available. Also, I'd like to remind you of an incredible opportunity to learn what drives your money management from a neuroscience, psychological, and theological perspective. Have you been to financial peace trainings but can't seem to execute on it? Do you shut down when budgets have to be reviewed or talked about? Have you ever wanted to have better insights to your team's money management personalities and why they are attached to money the way they are? Let us train you to know what is driving you, your spouse, your kids, and your church staff around financial issues. In our online financial personality training event, each attendee will be given a dynamic assessment instrument that is grounded in theories of psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience, neuromarketing, attachment, and addiction. It's both an experiential and a training event. Go to RedInkRevival.com and look under the Events tab to find out more about our online financial personality training event. Also, we're still planning to host our next Red Ink Revival Leadership Retreats for pastors and spouses, church staff and past spouses, and all other leaders. I hope everybody can make it to one of these life-changing events. The dates and more info is at RedInkRevival.com. Well, everything we're building is to resource you to be a wholehearted leader. I'd love for you to be a part of our tribe. I can't wait till our next episode. I'm glad you're with us today. We'll see you next time.